Hey everybody, we made it to season 23, which has no theme, so it's kind of a free-for-all. So hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, do whatever you want, just be safe. When a family member invites you over for lunch at their house, most people don't have any reason to believe they would be at risk. I mean, food poisoning can happen, but it's not usually intentional. Erin Patterson said she wanted to repair her strained relationship with her in-laws, and that was why she invited them to her house on July 29, 2003. She claimed that she had prepared an impressive meal which was meant to show her love, but when her guests became violently ill, it didn't take long to uncover Erin's true intentions. This is Monsters. Erin Trudy Scudder was born on September 30th, 1974 in Adelaide, South Australia. Her family soon moved to Melbourne, Victoria, and she grew up in the eastern suburb of Glen Waverley. People that knew her as a child said she was soft-spoken and private. Behind the scenes, Erin would later describe how her mother would weigh her and her sister each week in order to make sure they weren't gaining too much weight. That caused her to develop extremely low self-esteem, which resulted in an eating disorder. She said it caused her to barely eat as a child. Her mother, Heather Scudder, was a lecturer at Monash University in Melbourne, and she was an expert on children's literature. Her father, Eitan Scudder, was the director of multiple companies throughout Australia. The family was well known as intelligent and successful, and Erin's sister, Kane Wynne, became a scientist working at Monash University. Erin was offered a spot in the science program at the University of Melbourne, but eventually transferred to an accounting program. Not long after that, she quit school and trained to be an air traffic controller for the air service. She was one of the few people to make it through the rigorous program, and many of her coworkers described her as a bit of a loner, saying she was the only person who declined all invitations to social events. Others said she was a bit strange, claiming that a few colleagues called her either Crazy Erin or Scudder the Nutter. One former colleague described a time that Erin pretended to be a different employee and called in sick to their employer. Then she was seen giggling when that employee was being questioned by their boss as to why they were there after having called in. It wasn't clear if it was a prank or if Erin was trying to sabotage other employees in order to pick up more shifts. Erin didn't seem to have a clear idea of what she wanted to do for a living. She worked as an air traffic controller for about 3 years before she took a job in animal management for the Melbourne branch of the RSPCA. It was through friends Erin made at the RSPCA that she met a man named Simon Patterson in 2004. Simon was an engineer for the Monash City Council. Erin would go out to social events after work, and after meeting Simon, the couple started dating. He would later say he was attracted to her intelligence. The same year, Erin was driving in Glen Waverley when she was involved in a hit-and-run car accident. Once she was tracked down, it was revealed that she was 3 times over the legal drinking limit and had been going 95 kilometers per hour in a 60 kilometer per hour zone. That would be like going 60 miles per hour in a 35 mile per hour zone. She pleaded guilty to 5 charges related to her crime, was fined $1,000, and lost her driver's license for 2.5 years. That incident would contrast common reports later that she had no criminal record. Maybe because it was a traffic incident, it wasn't considered related, but she had been in trouble with the law earlier in her life, though the car accident seems to be the only case. In August of 2006, Erin's paternal grandmother died and her vast wealth was distributed amongst her children and grandchildren. Erin's share equaled about $2 million, which was to be dispersed throughout an 8-year period. I don't know how the full amount was split up, but if it was in equal parts, that would be about $250,000 a year. Simon and Erin got married in 2007 with Erin's cousin walking her down the aisle as her parents were vacationing in Russia at the time. That would lead to future speculation that Erin didn't have a close relationship with her parents. Erin and Simon both quit their jobs and began traveling around Australia. They eventually moved to Western Australia, where Erin opened a second-hand bookstore in Pemberton, about 3.5 hours south of Perth. Simon took a job working with the local council there. While living there, Erin became pregnant with the couple's first child, a son. She gave birth in 2009, and Erin would later say that her son's birth was traumatic as it took a long time and doctors had to perform an emergency cesarean after they lost the baby's heartbeat. Simon's parents, Dawn and Gail Patterson, had traveled to Western Australia to be there for the birth, and Erin would say she bonded with her in-laws during that time. Simon would later testify that Erin and his father, quote, shared a love of knowledge and learning and an interest in the world, and I think she loved his gentle nature. He said that his parents were really active in maintaining a good relationship with Erin. Before the birth of their second child, a daughter, the Pattersons moved to Korumburra, back in Victoria, about 2 hours southeast of downtown Melbourne, in order to be close to Simon's parents. They had their daughter in 2014, and Dawn and Gail watched their son while Erin was in labor. They were the ones to bring the boy to the hospital to meet his new sister. By that time, Erin and Simon's relationship was already on the rocks. The tension may have increased after Erin's father died in 2011. Though Erin seemed close to Simon's family, her rants to friends online showed otherwise. She called Simon a deadbeat and described his family as a lost cause. The couple had gone through multiple short-term separations since the time of their son's birth. The details of their relationship problems were kept mostly private, but in 2015 the couple separated for good. They still co-parented their children, even going on vacations together. The entire family went on trips to South Africa, New Zealand, Botswana, South Australia, and the Northern Territory. They came up with a financial arrangement where Simon paid school fees and medical bills. In 2019, Erin's mother died and her estate was split between her and her sister Cainwen. Part of the estate included a vacation home in Eden, New South Wales. They were able to sell the property for $900,000, and Erin used her half to provide interest-free loans to Simon's 3 siblings so they could purchase houses. That's been cited as a sign that the couple still got along well even years after the split, but that would change in 2022. That year, Simon filed his tax return listing himself as single. He would later claim it was an error on the part of his accountant, but that change made Erin ineligible for child support payments, and the government agency in control of the payments told Simon he could stop paying the school fees and medical expenses. Now, I'm not familiar with how child support in Australia is handled, but it definitely sounds like Simon was part of the decision to stop paying his children's fees. Just because the child support agency tells you that you can stop doesn't mean you have to. And if it was an error by his accountant, like he claimed, why wouldn't he accept that he should still pay the fees? I don't think the story given by either side is 100% accurate, and we will likely never know the true reason for what happened. But we do know that it caused a rift between Simon and Erin in what was previously a pretty cooperative relationship. It's unclear when Erin decided she was going to take revenge on her husband and in-laws, but it seemed she had plans in mind before the child support incident. Between November of 2021 and September of 2022, Simon was hospitalized 3 times with gastrointestinal symptoms. The first time, Simon had eaten some pasta prepared by Erin in late 2001. That caused him to suffer from vomiting and diarrhea, and he ended up spending the night in the hospital. He believed that he had gotten sick from the food she had made, but didn't think he was intentionally poisoned, as their relationship was still on good terms at the time. The second time happened during a camping trip in Victoria's high country in May of 2022. Simon recalled getting the fire going while Erin was preparing the food, so he hadn't witnessed how she had made it. After eating the chicken curry his wife had prepared, he became sick and within a few days was in a coma. His family was actually asked to come to the hospital to say goodbye because doctors didn't think he would make it. He underwent surgery to remove part of his bowel, which ended up saving his life. Then, during a family trip to the coast in September, he ate a veggie wrap that had been prepared by Erin and was soon suffering from nausea and diarrhea again. Then he started slurring his speech and gradually lost all muscle control. By the time he arrived at the hospital, he was only able to move his head. When he recovered, his doctor asked him to start a food journal so they could keep track of anything that might be causing his illness. When Erin gave him a batch of cookies that she claimed were baked by his daughter in February of 2023, he was hesitant to eat them. He later told his doctor that she called him repeatedly to ask if he had eaten them, which increased his suspicions and made him believe she had poisoned the food he had eaten previously. It was a pretty big coincidence that he had only gotten sick after having eaten food that she had prepared. That information was only released after Erin's murder trial in 2025. Simon had testified about the details of the suspected poison at a pre-trial hearing for that trial, but the judge chose to separate those attempted murder charges into their own trial, and the details of those charges were sealed and not allowed to be disclosed during her murder trial. The attempted murder charges were eventually dropped. The exact source of Simon's illness was never concerned, but an article later found on Erin's computer about rat poison made medical experts believe that was the poison she used. After Simon got the cookies, he removed Erin from his power of attorney and told family members about his suspicions, but he thought he was the only one at risk. He never expected that she would poison his family members. In an interview, Erin said that she was a fundamental atheist when she had met Simon, and she had expected he would join her beliefs, but the opposite happened. She became a Christian and began attending the Cornborough Baptist Church, where Simon's uncle was the pastor. Ian Wilkinson was married to Gail's sister, Heather Wilkinson. Erin would later testify that her resentment of her in-laws increased when she received a late invitation to her mother-in-law Gail's 70th birthday party, which made her feel snubbed. Erin went to a service at the church on July 16, 2003. There she invited Dawn and Gail along with Ian and Heather to lunch at her home on July 29th. She also invited Simon to the lunch. She told everyone that she needed to talk to them about medical issues, which was her claiming she had ovarian cancer during the lunch. That was a detail that would later be revealed to have been a lie. She made the event seem like an effort for the families to reconcile their issues and bring them back together. Simon's parents never expected Erin would have any intention of harming them, and though their son had told them of his suspicions about the cause of his illnesses, they truly believed Erin was trying to repair their relationship. Including Ian and Heather made the lunch seem even more innocent, as there was no reason Erin would have to harm them. On the day of the lunch, Erin cooked beef Wellington, an elegant dish that needs a lot of preparation. She told Simon she had spent a small fortune on beef eye fillet and wanted it to be a special meal. The traditional English dish consists of beef fillet, which is wrapped in layers of dry-cured ham, finely chopped mushrooms, and puff pastry. Then it's baked, sliced, and served. It's considered a more high-end dish served at fancier restaurants. Simon's concern that Erin would try to poison him again caused him to send a last-minute text message telling Erin he couldn't make it. Erin did not respond well to the cancellation, sending him a message about how hard she had worked on the meal. He believed that Erin would use the lunch to give him his own poisoned portion of food and didn't believe his family members were in danger. Erin served individual beef Wellington portions to her guests instead of the traditional single large dish cut into slices. Her deviation from the recipe became a critical element in the case, but she blamed it on her inability to find a large enough piece of beef tenderloin. The beef Wellingtons had a mushroom paste that Erin had prepared using button mushrooms, garlic, and shallots. She said that she found the mixture a little bland and added dried mushrooms from a Tupperware container in her pantry. Ian Wilkinson's testimony revealed that the 4 guests received their portions on large gray dinner plates, while Erin ate from a smaller tan-colored plate. It's believed that she served the poison meal on different plates to avoid accidentally consuming the deadly fungus. The seemingly pleasant meal soon turned nightmarish as all 4 guests developed severe symptoms. Heather suddenly rushed to the laundry and started vomiting that night. Ian experienced similar symptoms and said, quote, "We had vomiting and diarrhea, and yes, that continued right through the night." Dawn and Gail Patterson suffered from the same relentless illness. The victims' conditions deteriorated substantially by the next morning, requiring hospitalization. The following day, as all 4 of the lunch guests were admitted to the hospital, Erin also complained of stomach pain but didn't go to the hospital. Her children said she told them she didn't feel well but spent the day running errands. Later that day, Erin and the kids ate leftovers from the previous day's lunch. The following day, the 31st, Erin finally went to the hospital but only spent a few minutes there. She declined a full examination and left on her own. She went back to the hospital a few hours later and was transferred to Monash Medical Center because the doctors believed the Pattersons and Wilkinsons had ingested Amanita phalloides, or what some call death cap mushrooms. They are extremely poisonous, and since Erin had eaten the same meal, the medical staff assumed she'd also been poisoned. At Monash Medical Center, Erin was assessed by a doctor who recorded that she was clinically well and that all of her vital signs were normal. Dr. Christopher Webster was sure by then that the mushrooms were the cause of the poisoning, and when he asked her where she had got them, she immediately told him she got them from Woolworths. That was a popular chain supermarket and did not sell anything that would match what she had used. The doctor was still concerned about her children after they found out they had eaten the leftovers, but Erin refused to admit them to the hospital, so Dr. Webster alerted the authorities.
Hello, what address do you need the police?
This is Dr. Chris Webster calling from Leongatha Hospital, and I have a concern regarding a patient that presented here earlier but has left the building and is potentially exposed to a fatal toxin from mushroom poisoning, and I've tried several times to get hold of her on her mobile phone.
What's her name?
The last name is Patterson, Patterson.
First name?
Erin, Erin.
It became suspicious that a mother would not want to bring her children to the hospital if there was even a chance that they had ingested a poisonous substance. When 70-year-old Gail and 66-year-old Heather both died on August 4th, 5 days after the lunch, the Victoria police began an investigation. Dawn, also 70, died the following day. 69-year-old Ian remained in the hospital for over 7 weeks, where he gradually recovered from the poison. Police interviewed Erin on the 5th regarding the deaths of Gail and Heather, as Dawn hadn't died yet and his condition was still critical. The detective explained that they needed more information about what led to the deaths as well as why she didn't get sick. That had become a major point of suspicion with doctors and then the authorities. Erin first defended herself, pointing out how she had helped the investigation by providing the leftovers from the lunch to the health department. She had also given the investigators a fruit platter that Heather had brought with her to the lunch, as well as some gravy that was left over from the meal. He then asked her about whether she had foraged for the mushrooms or if she had ever owned a food dehydrator.
Obviously, we've got concerns in relation to the mushrooms and where they've come from. Okay. Is that something you've done in the past, foraging for the mushrooms or anything like that? Never. Right. Do you preserve foods or anything like that?
No.
Have you ever dehydrated food or anything like that? Okay.
By then, Erin had claimed that she had purchased some dehydrated mushrooms from an Asian market about 3 months prior to the lunch. She said that after tasting the mushroom paste and finding it was bland, she added some of the dehydrated mushrooms to the mix. When police searched her home, though, they didn't find any other products that looked like they'd been from an Asian market. There was a specific reason the investigators wanted to know if she had ever owned a food dehydrator, though, and that was because they already knew she had. The police had already been investigating the poison before anyone had died. When Erin refused treatment at the hospital, the doctor was extremely concerned. He had told Erin that she had likely ingested an extremely deadly toxin, and she just shrugged it off, saying she had to feed her animals and get her daughter ready for ballet. That seemed highly suspicious, because anyone else who had been told the other 4 people who had eaten the same meal were fighting for their lives would have no problem being admitted, especially if they had also had stomach issues like she had claimed to have. It was clear that Erin had just made up her stomach issues so as to not raise suspicions, being the only one who hadn't gotten sick. But that just made her more suspicious when she wouldn't stay at the hospital. Then the health department officer Sally Ann Atkinson contacted Erin in an attempt to get more information about the ingredients in the food she had served for lunch. Her calls went unanswered, and when she sent a text, Erin responded saying she was busy looking after her kids while also being in meetings at the hospital, and she would get her the information she wanted as soon as she could. So not only did she have no interest in making sure she or her children hadn't been poisoned, she also showed no urgency in getting information to the health department, who were doing everything they could to save Dawn, Gail, Ian, and Heather. After the doctor called the police that day, an investigation began and a trail of evidence was quickly discovered. It started back in February of 2023 when Erin started using a second cell phone. The 2 phones would become known as Phone A, her original phone that used the number everyone knew, and Phone B, a new phone that nobody else knew about. When investigators searched her home on August 5th, one of the items they found was Phone B. They also had taken her computer, and they were able to uncover more details through her online activity. They discovered that Erin had been using a website called iNaturalist. That was a place where people could post things they found out in nature. People could post interesting plants they find, or they could use it as a crowdsourcing site to identify different plant species. On April 18th, a user had posted a warning about finding some deathcap mushrooms in an area near Locke, about 28 kilometers or 17 miles away from her home. On April 28th, Erin's cell phone activity showed her traveling to that area, where she remained stationary for about 20 minutes. Then she went to a home goods store just a few minutes from her house, where she purchased a Sunbeam food dehydrator. Deathcap mushrooms do not lose their toxicity when cooked or dehydrated. It's not clear if Erin knew that, or if she just happened to get lucky, for lack of a better term, but she knew she wasn't going to be able to use them right away, so she needed to preserve them. On May 21st, another member of iNaturalist posted about finding deathcap mushrooms in an area near Outram, about 20 kilometers or 12 miles away from her home. The following day, her cell phone showed her traveling back to the Locke area and then to the Outram area, staying at both locations for about 20 minutes each. During the months surrounding Erin's trips to collect mushrooms, she posted about dehydrating mushrooms in a true crime Facebook group. Pictures that Erin had taken of the mushrooms in a food dehydrator were recovered from electronic devices. Her internet history showed searches for deathcap mushrooms and information about lethal levels. There were searches for information about whether poisoning could look like a natural death. She researched inheritance and insurance laws. Basically, every bit of information you might want to know if you were going to poison someone. She had also purchased books about mushrooms and foraging. After investigators found the purchase receipt for the food dehydrator, they found surveillance footage of Erin at a landfill transfer station dumping the dehydrator into an e-waste bin. They were able to collect the dehydrator from the bin. That happened the day before police searched her home and brought her in for questioning. Even after investigators had collected Phone B from her house, Erin didn't stop trying to cover her tracks. They eventually learned that Phone B was not her main phone. When they searched her home, they wanted her phone and she gave them Phone B as if it were her main phone. She had done 3 factory resets of that phone. The first was on August 2nd, and she claimed that her son had dropped the phone in the mud, and after cleaning it, she did a factory reset to get it to work. Then she did another on August 5th, which she admitted was to delete pictures. She would later claim at her trial that she had taken pictures of the mushrooms in the dehydrator and knew they would make her look guilty. She not only deleted those pictures, but she tossed the dehydrator and denied having owned one. Then she did a remote factory reset on the phone on August 6th, the day after the interview, while her phone was with the police. When asked about that while on the stand, she claimed she was just curious if she could see the location of all of her devices if she logged into her Google account. When she saw phone B, she allegedly thought, quote, "I wonder if they've been silly enough to leave it connected to the internet." So she hit the factory reset option to see what would happen, and it worked. So let's break this down. 4 of your relatives have been severely poisoned, likely from food you served. 2 of them had died. You are being investigated about it, and your thoughts are to check the location status of your devices and test out if the police have been quote-unquote silly. Either that's not what happened, or you are one dense motherfucker. While the police were investigating Erin, the health department was investigating the food. They needed to know exactly what substance was in the food that had poisoned the Pattersons and the Wilkinsons and where it had come from. Despite suspicion being on Erin, the health department needed to ensure that nobody else was in danger of ingesting the poison. They tested the leftovers that had been collected, and they came back positive for alpha and beta ammonitins, the toxin present in death cap mushrooms. Both Dawn and Ian tested positive for the same toxin, but both Gail and Heather tested negative. Toxicologists explained that the test should be conducted within 24 hours in order to definitely find the toxin, but the victims were tested after that period. The lack of a positive result didn't mean they hadn't ingested the death cap mushrooms. Erin and her children were tested, and those results were negative. Erin claimed she ate the same meal as her in-laws, but as the person who prepared the meal, she could have easily eaten a non-poisoned portion. She also claimed that her children had eaten the leftovers the following day, which was confirmed by her children, but it also could have easily been a non-poisoned portion. One of the toxicologists involved in testing the food said that 2 different portions of leftovers were collected from the house, but they were unfortunately placed into the same bag, so it was not possible to tell if one of the portions was free of poison. At the time the leftovers were collected, the idea that the poison might have been intentional was not considered. After the dehydrator was collected, tests came back positive for the toxin inside that as well. A representative from the health department went to every Asian food market in the area but could not find any mushrooms like Erin had described purchasing. The health department concluded their case on August 11th. The police spent the next few months building a case against Erin before formally arresting her on November 2nd, 2023. Erin pleaded not guilty to 3 counts of murder and 5 counts of attempted murder. At that point, the murder charges were for Dawn, Gail, and Heather, and the attempted murder charges were for Ian and 4 counts for Simon. Those included the 3 previous alleged poisoning attempts, as well as an attempt to poison him during the lunch by inviting him. Investigators had also found information on Erin's computer about barium carbonate poisoning. Barium carbonate is the active ingredient in rat poison. The doctor that had treated Simon during his unexplained illnesses said that his symptoms were consistent with barium carbonate poisoning. The judge chose to separate the lunch poisonings and Simon's poisoning, so Erin's trial was just for the murders and the attempted murder during the July 29th lunch. The trial began on April 29, 2025, and prosecutors had a mountain of evidence that showed that Erin had planned out the poisoning of her in-laws at that lunch. It was almost impossible to believe the amount of coincidences that would have had to have happened in order for this to have been an accident. Not just coincidences, but unexplained behavior and lies about that behavior. First, the entire situation was based on a lie. Erin took the stand and testified in her own defense, which was unusual, but there wasn't a lot the defense could do to argue against her charges. On the stand, she made a shocking admission about making up medical issues to get her in-laws together for the fatal meal. She said, quote, "I didn't have a legitimate medical reason. No, that's true." She denied saying she had cancer outright, claiming she only hinted at undergoing investigations around ovarian cancer that might need future treatment. She said that she was planning gastric bypass surgery and would need her in-laws to watch her children when she got the procedure. She was apparently embarrassed about getting gastric bypass surgery due to her lifelong issues with her weight and her negative self-image. Because of that, she lied about what medical procedure she was having while setting up the situation for childcare during that time. Prosecutors later proved the clinic she mentioned she was going to for gastric bypass surgery didn't do that procedure. When Ian took the stand, he gave vital testimony about what happened at the meal. He told the court how Erin had announced that she had cancer after serving the beef Wellington. She told them it was very serious and life-threatening and wanted advice about telling her children. He also described how the 4 guests ate from gray plates while Erin used a smaller tan-colored plate. That supported the prosecution's case that Erin deliberately kept her portions separate from the poisoned food. Then there were the lies about mushrooms. She initially claimed she had gotten the mushrooms from Woolworths. It was only after that proved unlikely that she added that she also purchased mushrooms from an Asian market. During that time, she completely denied ever having foraged for mushrooms or having owned a dehydrator. When investigators found online searches for mushrooms and books about foraging, her story changed and she said she did go foraging. When her children were interviewed, they said they had never known her to go foraging. And of course, the dehydrator was found along with a receipt for its purchase. Erin's story changed yet again, and she admitted that she had dehydrated mushrooms. She had lied about her cell phone, handing over phone B and making the authorities believe it was a regular phone. Phone A physically was never recovered. Ultimately, after she had changed her story multiple times in order to match evidence that investigators had uncovered, Erin's story was that she had purchased fresh mushrooms from Woolworths and dehydrated mushrooms from an Asian market. Then she also foraged for some mushrooms, coincidentally from the same area where deathcap mushrooms had been reported, and dehydrated them, and they got mixed up with the mushrooms from the Asian market, and some of those must have been deathcap mushrooms, but she was not aware of that. Then she used those dehydrated mushrooms to make a meal where only her guests got sick, but not herself or her children. Oh, and she randomly threw away an almost brand new food dehydrator for no apparent reason. Right. The trial lasted 11 weeks with more than 50 witnesses taking the stand. Erin spent 8 days on the stand testifying and being cross-examined. The jury saw 125 exhibits of evidence from mushroom samples to digital messages. The prosecution focused on Erin's calculated actions, though they never established a clear motive, which Justice Christopher Beale later pointed out wasn't needed for a conviction. The 12-member jury reached its verdict in July of 2025 and found Erin guilty on all charges. On September 8, 2025, Erin Patterson was sentenced to 3 concurrent life sentences for the murders of Dawn Patterson, Gail Patterson, and Heather Wilkinson. She also received a 25-year sentence for the attempted murder of Ian Wilkinson. Justice Beale stressed that Erin's crimes deserved, quote, the imposition of the maximum penalties for her crimes. Erin would have to serve at least 33 years of her sentence, meaning she cannot seek parole until 2056. She will be 82 years old then. After her conviction, the charges against her relating to the attempted murders of Simon were dropped. Family members now face a future without their loved ones. Ian Wilkinson's body is healed, but he carries the weight of being the only one who survived that deadly lunch. Erin's children must deal with losing their grandparents while their mother spends life behind bars. This shocking breach of family trust and carefully planned poisoning shows how deadly plans can hide in normal family settings. Erin spent years hiding her true feelings from her family, and despite her being educated and financially secure, she let her hatred boil over to the point where she wanted to take the lives of her ex-husband and his family. She could have moved on and continued her life with her children, but instead she threw that all away by becoming a monster. Thanks so much for letting me tell you this story. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave a comment. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.